Caitlyn and Jinx, if you have a much closer look, are different sides of the very same coin, having so much more in common that we might think despite considering themselves enemies throughout the majority of the plot. To list a few, they both are goal-driven, focused. They both tend to get obsessive. They're both clearly talented. They both were heavily shaped by events that happened to them, and these events were strictly tied to one another or even the same ones, connected to each other. I would think of Caitlyn and Jinx as this massive plot string. If you stretch one side, it instantly influences the other side. If one is in a good place mentally, then the other one is miserable. They both are similar visually, having different shades of blue hair, blue eyes. They both are tightly attached to Vi. They both use guns, however in very different ways. Caitlyn in more of a precision-oriented style, focused. Jinx in a chaotic way, but equally successful. One uses long-distance guns, prefers to stay away, and actually reflect on what is she shooting for. The other one uses short-distance gun, more effective in direct battle. Both use their guns to reach specific goals. However, both also use their guns at one point against their own nature, ultimately hurting someone they very much love. Their parallels, while clear in Season 2, go all the way back to Season 1, Episode 1, when they ended up in the same building, on the opposite sides of the wall, where their journey began, and we are also going to start there. Caitlyn, and back then still Powder, were taken to the Kiriman building merely as companions. The leaders were of course Jace and Vi. Both were still support characters. When Powder reached for the gemstone and caused the explosion, it heavily influenced their further mutual journey. Neither one of them were hurt, but as a result they ended up entangled in a plot bigger than them on a major scale, but focused on them on a micro scale. Very much like in League of Legends lore, they were already on the opposite sides. They started their journey together, and they ended it in a similar way, only the wall was replaced by prison bars. And one could make a decision regarding the other, not without reflecting on herself first. Both, early on in Season 1, looked up to someone. Powder to Vi for being brave enough to organize a Piltover heist, her older sister. Caitlyn to Jace, admiring his brave enough to go to Zone, which she clearly considered a dangerous place at the time. Both soon enough got separated from that person, having to discover who they are on their own. Caitlyn was separated from Jace due to Cassandra's decision he's not suitable anymore. Powder from Vi by the end of the act as a result of Silco's intrigue. They both were naturally still shaping at this point, defining their individual goals, while Caitlyn was already on her way towards becoming an enforcer, realizing she's a misfit, that she doesn't want to be who her mother expects her to be, reflecting on what she's shooting for as Grayson asked her. Powder was slowly showing signs of losing it, slowly becoming someone who's a bit unhinged, unpredictable, fuchsia zone criminal. But we also know from the alternate reality episode that at this point it could have gone either way for her. It's not like she was doomed. They were both already heavily focused on their weapons of choice. Powder building bombs, rockets, as well as her short distance gun. Caitlyn learning how to properly aim with a long distance gun. Both needed to go through events that influenced them enough to reach their default roles. Powder commenced her journey towards becoming somewhat darker by trying to help, which led to losing Vander because of her by the end of Act 1, and ultimately later on transforming into Jinx. Caitlyn, possibly influenced by the heist, already had this idea of being an enforcer. We were never directly shown an impact of being a victim made on her, but it surely did not leave her indifferent. Heist and its results saw an explosion that Caitlyn suffered from had to be one of the reasons why she drifted towards the enforcers, apart from her inner sense of justice. However, her being an enforcer did not start the way she wanted.
I'm working.
Oh, I can see that. I mean, there's so much crime to thwart outside your family's tent.
And neither did Jinx serving Silco. Caitlyn and Jinx were still merely starting off their mutually tied journeys in Act 2. Interestingly so, both revolting against their respective parent figures. Caitlyn wanted to do more, to be more, get more responsible jobs, and so did Jinx. Both of them went against their parents to pursue their own agenda, and ended up entangled in mutual obsession without realizing yet it's what's going to connect them for all the episodes to come. Jinx performed an attack, which Caitlyn examined. Both of them performed actions that weren't planned. Caitlyn was only supposed to guard her mother's tent.
I can only imagine the strings she pulled to have me posted here.
Jinx was only supposed to guard the cargo. They both went outside of what they were supposed to do, which shows they are both ambitious, goal-driven, and both have strong personalities. Jinx attacked on the Progress Day event and got the gemstone.
Fire!
Caitlyn was the first one to intervene. She followed Jinx's trap, saw her graffiti that she will see once more in that season, when it becomes far more personal. Yet again, she became a victim of Jinx's explosion. In fact, most explosions that Jinx caused hurt Caitlyn. She also saw Jinx for the very first time in person. It almost feels like she was marked that day. Both got something out of that event. For Caitlyn, it was knowledge about who's in charge of the attacks, enabling her to push her investigation forward, meeting Vi. For Jinx, it was the gemstone. Both also embarked on personal journeys in Season 1 Act 2 that led to them realizing what they strongly believed was simply not true. For Caitlyn, it was naturally the fact Zone is not an evil place she thought it would be, a conclusion she was led to thanks to seeing Zone through Vi's eyes, no doubt divining her Season 1 plot. For Jinx, it was realizing Silco has been lying to her, telling Jinx her sister abandoned her, when in fact she didn't. That's when it became personal, because while to Caitlyn, Vi has already started becoming a partner, future enforcer. To Jinx, Vi was a sister that she lost, she got again, and that she was about to lose again. Both suddenly had to confront the fact that Vi means a great deal to both of them. Both had to live with that. Both had to accept the fact. And it wasn't an easy thing to accept, especially to Jinx.
Who's she? Who are you?
This conflict of interest led to Jinx's obsession absolute peak. At no point in the future she hated her as much as now. Vi was not even an enforcer yet. She was simply with an enforcer, which was enough to antagonize Jinx heavily, because it happened just as soon as she thought she could get Vi back. That Vi is alive, may be there for her, but by far it did not go as they planned.
Vi?
Jinx and Caitlyn's fate are intertwined to a degree. Anytime Jinx is low, Caitlyn's in a better place. Anytime Caitlyn is low, Jinx is doing a bit better. So while Caitlyn was getting closer to Vi in Echo's hideout, Jinx was watching their steps being chased by her own demons, resulting in Caitlyn becoming her single biggest obsession.
Caitlyn.
As well as following them to the bridge where the explosion occurred. Blasts seemed to very much define their mutual connection, push the events forward, influencing both, whether it was Kiraman building explosion that led to Vanda's death and made an impact on almost everybody, or bridge explosion that ironically led to Vi leaving Jinx behind, which only further increased Jinx's insecurity to its peak, leading to her creating a master plan to get rid of Caitlyn for good. While Caitlyn was looking for a peaceful way out, Jinx was plotting her revenge, demonizing Caitlyn, viewing her as a villain. The moment when she says,
She wouldn't do that. Not again.
Indicates to her Vi being friendly with an enforcer equals abandoning her again, like she did in Act 1. We have to assume ever since the bridge confrontation she's been constantly watching them. She knew where to find Caitlyn in the final episode, and she took all this time to create an abomination of a dinner.
Make her go away. Please.
Where she decided to confront everyone, including Vi and Silco, ultimately making Vi choose between them. Jinx's actions during that dinner led to not only final explosion that caused Cassandra's death, both of them lost a parent that night. However, Jinx lost Silco due to her own action, directly, because she was trying to protect Vi from Silco's shot. Now Season 2 is where it gets a bit more apparent and also a bit more complicated. Early on in Season 2 they both faced the consequences of losing their parents. Caitlyn lost Cassandra. Cassandra was a valued member of Piltover society. She was a council member. She was famously known, and so her funeral was grand. Everyone attended. There were memorials. There were sculptures built in her name. And there was Caitlyn suffering, the song playing in the back being quite gentle and profoundly sad. Now Jinx, on the other hand, her way of suffering was different. While episode 1 showed us the splendor of Cassandra's funeral, episode 2 showed us how lonely it's been to say goodbye to Silco. Jinx, contrasting Cassandra's grand funeral, had to say goodbye to Silco alone in a sewage, but they both, deep down, had to let go of their parents. Songs playing in the back differed a lot. While Sucker is more edgy, more dynamic, song playing during Cassandra's funeral was simply sad. The lyrics though. Sucker tells a story about someone who's feeling dead inside, and I Can Hear It Now, it's a song about drowning. Get the fuck out of my head, so long, sucker. So despite the differences in the ways they had to say goodbye, they suffered in a very similar way, feeling that they lost a big part of themselves. Caitlyn felt responsible for Cassandra's death. Jinx felt responsible for Silco's death. Very soon, both were placed in a position of leadership, positions they did not want, yet they accepted because they had to. Both became symbols, Jinx for Zoan and Caitlyn for Piltover. Both had visual symbols placed all around the city. Both lost Vi in certain parts of Season 2. Both lost their body parts.
You're a symbol.
You want a symbol?
Very much essential to who they were, Caitlyn her eye and Jinx her finger. Both during their certain parts of their stories expected Vi to be someone, to be a certain way. And in Season 2 they both accepted that Vi is who she is. At some point they also realized that they're not going to change her anymore. When Jinx came to get Vi because Vander came back, she didn't really see Caitlyn as a threat anymore. That was behind her, the moment when she decided to die early on in Season 2. It feels like her hatred towards Caitlyn died as well. Now Caitlyn, when she reconnected with Vi in episode 6, she saw Jinx as someone who's part of the family, a daughter very much like herself, and it feels like in this moment she no longer saw Jinx as someone who's her sole biggest enemy. Finally, by the end of Season 2, they both gave something up. We know that Jinx, given the fact that she probably survived, gave up her part in the cycle of violence, gave up her bond with Vi, and left, removing herself from the equation. Caitlyn, she gave up her council seat. She gave up politics to be there for Vi, to secure a council seat for Zoan. They both picked a greater good by the end of the season. Now there's lots of parallels between seasons 1 and 2. Both Caitlyn and Jinx lost a parent by the end of Season 1. They both felt responsible for it. Both had good intentions early on, they just wanted to help. Powder just wanted to help Vi getting Vander back. Caitlyn just wanted to pursue the investigation on her own and find out who is responsible for the attacks. Both went through a ceremony, so to speak. Whether it was Jinx's baptism in the waters around Stillwater when Silco told her that she is Jinx, or Caitlyn when she was officially named as a commander by Ambessa, put on a spot, giving a position of power she never wanted. Both expected Vi to get rid of the other one at some points, whether it was during the final Season 1 dinner.
Send her on her way in. And you can have Powder back.
Or early on in Season 2 when Caitlyn wanted Vi's help getting rid of Jinx.
You can show that not all of Zoan supports Jinx. We can show them.
They both heavily relied on Vi in Act 1, Powder in Act 1 of Season 1, then Caitlyn in Season 2 Act 1. Powder, by the end of Season 1 Act 1, lost her identity and began her transformation towards Jinx. Caitlyn, by the end of Season 2 Act 1, began her transformation towards the Commander. They both changed for worse after separating from Vi. Powder separated from Vi early on in Season 1. She became Silco's tool, a criminal. Caitlyn, when she separated from Vi early on in Season 2, when she lost her way because Vi was the only one holding her accountable, the only one trying to keep her to her highest standards.
Everyone in my life has changed. Promise me you won't change.
Both took under consideration what they have become in particular moments of the seasons, by looking into their own reflections. Jinx seeing her own reflections in a shattered mirror, Caitlyn seeing her own reflection through a loop, with Jinx visible there as well, suggesting that right now, Jinx and Caitlyn are not at all different. In fact, as long as they're both part of the violence cycle, they're very much the same. Another indication of the very same thing was the way Caitlyn took a shot towards Jinx, but turns out it was a reflective shield. It feels like each time they go against each other, it's the same dark emotions that define their movements. Both lost Vi by the end of Act 1 under very drastic circumstances, and as a result they were taken in by someone who's going to heavily influence them and manipulate them. For Powder it was Silco, who was naturally manipulating her, telling her that her sister abandoned her, when in fact, according to his best knowledge, Vi died.
Your sister's gone. You know that as well as I do.
Caitlyn was taken in by Ambessa. Ambessa was also feeding her lies, manipulating her, especially during their conversation by the fire.
We've lost so many. The anger, the sorrow. God, I know it's tiring. But you will never rest knowing that she's out there.
Both Silco and Ambessa filled the hole that Vi left.
I owe you thanks. Your absence provided a vacuum I was able to fill.
Both were heavily obsessed with one another. Jinx in Season 1 and Caitlyn in Season 2.
Why would I remember her name? Oh, she's just some stupid topsider.
But then there's Jinx, laughing. I want to tear that laugh from her throat forever.
Both shared very similar shots. One good example was the shooting range. Both tried to manipulate Vi at certain points. For Caitlyn it was offering her the badge, for Jinx it was the dinner. Both also at certain points treated Vi poorly, either hit her, tied her up. Both, of course, cared for Vi deeply despite that. Both had to accept the fact that they come as a package. Both at some points found themselves separated from Vi, while the other one was in a very good place at the moment, whether it was Echo's hideout or Victor's commune. Both were left behind by Vi when Vi decided to go and help out the other, either on the bridge in Season 1 or when Vi joined the Enforcers. Both heavily relied on their guns throughout the journey. So the thing about the cycle of violence is that everyone is part of it. As Silco suggested, sometimes you might think you're on the right side of history, but all it takes is one event to cross a line towards hatred. Jinx wasn't the only one pushing this cycle forward. It was everyone, Caitlyn included. More importantly, both of them, both Caitlyn and Jinx, realized at certain points of their story that there are daughters who just lost their parents, who are grieving. They both value family. They both value Vi. Their final gestures, a result of their prison conversation, served exactly that purpose, helping out Vi. For Jinx, it was removing herself from the violence cycle. For Caitlyn, it was allowing Jinx to go freely and do whatever she wants. And since Caitlyn was part of that cycle of violence, if she were to actually judge Jinx in that final prison scene, if she was to put her on the trial, then she might have as well placed herself in the very same cell. Because their actions reflected one another, were directly linked to one another, influencing each other. But at the end of the day, they share by far more than initially divided them. Thank you so much for watching. Looking forward to your comments. Major shout out to my patrons.